All right, it's about 3 minutes past the hour. Um, we are waiting on one presenter. She may be stuck in the storm commute, but she also had a presentation yesterday, but I know she said she'll be making it. So let's begin though. I try to start on time, but give everybody a little leeway to make it on. Good morning, and thank you for joining the California Public Utilities Commission's 2023 Quarter One webinar. We here in the Business and Community Outreach Office use these webinars as another tool to shed light on the California Public Utilities Commission. If you have any suggestions that you'd like to hear during one of our quarterly webinars, feel free to ping your local government and community liaisons, shown here. Um, Notice that we do have the Northern California area and the Southern California area, where today it'll be myself, Andrew Rubang, and Hector Corral that will be moderating both the presenters and the Q&A sessions. We do have a packed schedule with ample opportunity to hear from you in the audience. There will be 3 Q&A sessions after each presenter, and that's where Hector Corral will be moderating those questions. So please feel free to drop those questions in the chat. They will be monitored throughout. And before I pass the microphone to our first presenter, we at the Outreach arm of the department do want to recognize the impacts of the storm. Many in the Central Coast, San Joaquin Valley, the northern tips of California, Big Bear, and the foothills are dealing with floods, massive storms. Beach cities have their slippage and power outages. Again, if there's anything that we may help with, please don't hesitate to reach out to your local liaisons. But eventually, these storms will pass, and the resiliency of California will show. And at that time, we will move our communities along to the next evolution of our society, electrification. And without further ado, our first speaker is from the Department, Energy Division, Abhilasha Wadhwa. She has joined the CPUC in 2017 in the Energy Efficiency Branch. She's the lead staff for 2 building electrification programs focused on market transformation, known as Tech and Build. And prior to the CPUC, Abhi supervised the existing buildings unit at the California Energy Commission, and before that, worked in the private sector in various facets of energy efficiency policies and programs. Abhi obtained her master's in architecture from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas in 2007, where her work focused on mapping and publicizing carbon emissions from local residential energy use. Abhi is a strong advocate for engaging individuals and communities for transforming energy markets. Everybody, please welcome Abhi. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Glad to be here. Really excited to engage with our communities. And I'm hoping what we do today is not only provide you with contacts for us and make us your resource as you think about decarbonization for your communities, but also give you resources to connect to each other on how to do this together and clarify what the purpose is, maybe break some myths. So again, I will also roll into the next slide without keeping you in too much suspense. Let's first talk about what we are going to do today. So after my presentation, which is going to focus on the role of state agencies in decarbonization, we have a handpicked list of speakers who want to introduce you to some of the nitty-gritties of decarbonization and electrification, as well as what resources are available both for the individual as well as for governments across the state. And to do that, we have a speaker from Building Decarbonization Coalition, Becky Menton, who should be joining us shortly, and a speaker from the State Treasurer's Office, Kelly Delani, who's going to speak about the Go Green financing program that the state runs. Finally, Nick, my supervisor, will be giving closing remarks. So first of all, why do we electrify buildings? Why are we considering this to be a signature strategy for decarbonization? This is one of the latest data from the California Air Resources Board. And what it shows us is that buildings account for 14% of our greenhouse gas emissions, out of which, even though the residential sector is 8%, we started our programs with the focus on residential because we felt like in some ways it was the most straightforward technology case for electrifying end users. And we'll speak more about that through the course of the day. Next slide, please. So out of the building use of energy itself, natural gas accounts for 49% of building energy use, right? So that's why it makes sense to start focusing on where is the biggest bang for the buck. Next slide, please. So let's talk about where in residential sector do we start seeing the use of natural gas, right? So you have your gas furnace, which typically would take somewhere around 20 to 30, sometimes even 40% for leaky homes of energy use. We have your natural gas water heaters. There's, of course, the gas stovetop and ovens. There's your clothes dryers. For more affluent households, there might be pool pumps and fireplaces. So if we go down this list, it becomes more and more intuitive for us, at least as policymakers, to see where should the resources be devoted to, where will we again get the most benefit from turning these appliances into electric appliances. Next slide, please. So the other portion I want to clarify, you may have heard the word decarbonization and electrification used almost synonymously. Uh, there is a difference. While electrification is a core strategy of decarbonization, it is not the only strategy. Within CPUC, we also look at removing carbon from within fuel sources themselves. So examples of decarbonized fuels would include biomethane or renewable natural gas, renewable hydrogen, and biosyngas. So CPUC is also focused on changing the portfolio standards for the investor-owned utilities to make the gas, which we know we will have to continue to use for certain end users, like industrial end users, certain industrial processes. We want to make sure that gas is coming from as green sources as possible. So that is the other strategy of decarbonization. Next slide, please. So I want to give a quick broad brush overview of what the core agencies that are involved in decarbonization across the state do. Of course, there's Public Utilities Commission. As you may know, our core job is to ensure the grid safety and reliability for all Californians. We also set rates. And at the same time, on the demand side management side, which is from the customer side, we run hundreds of programs to bring the customer to adopt the new technologies that are going to be favorable for the state as a whole and in line with our GHG reduction goals. We also have our sister agency, California Energy Commission, uh, which is not an oversight agency for utilities, but sets the building energy code and sets the energy policy for the state, uh, and often works with us for that. They are also the ones who approve the local reach code. So while the state code is sort of a baseline that every local government is supposed to do, local governments can choose to be more progressive than the state code and get it approved by the Energy Commission. So it is in their jurisdiction to give you that approval. Finally, they do demand analysis for our state. They look at the demand curve, how much energy is being used and is forecasted to be used, and whether the resources are in balance. And very recently, they have also been taking on technology adoption programs. I'll speak about it a little more later. But recently, the legislature has approved almost $900 million of building electrification programs that will be run by the Energy Commission. I'd also like to talk about California Air Resources Board. Andrew, if you can go back one more minute. So California Air Resources Board is in charge of the cap and trade regulations, which is basically the mechanism by which they ensure that any emitters of greenhouse gases that are emitting above a certain threshold are paying their fair share for those emissions. They set zero GHG emission standards for a variety of gases. For example, refrigerants, they do it for NOx, they do it for many other gases, including carbon dioxide. And lastly, the one that's important to us that I picked out to speak about for this presentation is refrigerants, because refrigerants are in every heat pump, and heat pump is a core technology of electrification. So thankfully, our sister agency has a very keen eye on it and is also ensuring to make sure that refrigerant standards themselves become more and more stringent as we get into this era of electrification. Next slide, please. So here I'm just trying to give a broad brush stroke of what CARB has done. This is a CARB slide. They set the zero emission standards for space and water heaters. They started the stakeholder engagement this year, and they plan to take their proposed regulations for consideration about to 2025 and for implementation to begin in 2030. And what this would mean is that starting 2030, there will no longer be sale of gas appliances for these end users in California. They also are looking into the embodied carbon of building materials pursuant to AB 2446, which would measure and reduce carbon intensity of construction materials for new buildings. Next slide, please. Andrew, how am I doing on time? Okay. This is the refrigerant part that I was talking about. Our sister, both these slides are what CARB does. They set standards for refrigerants, and this slide shows you what the standards are going to be and when they kick into effect. And at the end of this slide presentation deck, I've also attached resources which should be available to you for reference later. Andrew, you can go to the next slide. And this is a very recent regulation that CARB is working on. And by 2025, they are going to be posting an assessment coming out of this regulation. This regulation will prohibit the sale of virgin bulk, high GWP HFCs, and it actually sets the timeline for it. Okay, so now let's talk about what CPUC does. We have a whole plethora of proceedings that we run related to building electrification. I'll start with our signature proceeding, which was kicked off in 2020, the building decarbonization proceeding. And what it did in the first phase was it started right off the gate couple of incentive programs for new construction and existing buildings. And last year, it also set rules for line extensions, basically ending allowances for extending natural gas pipeline in new zones, in new developments. Secondly, we have the long-term gas decommissioning proceeding, and I've put the links to all of these in the resources slide. What this proceeding does is it systematically looks at how to eliminate certain natural gas pipelines so that at the end of the day, the burden does not fall on the low-income customer to carry the remaining of the natural gas infrastructure on their own rates. The third one is the Mobile Home Park Utility Conversion Program. This is a program to convert master metered mobile home parks, which usually tend to be low income, that are generally sitting with very old dilapidated infrastructure underground owned by the park owner. What this program does is it allows the park owner to turn over that infrastructure to the utility, who updates it, renews it, and provides individual meters to the homes which were originally on the master meter owned by the park owner. The fourth one you may have heard about was the San Joaquin Valley Affordable Energy Pilots. These pilots have now concluded, but and the evaluations are now posted on our website. These were some 1,600 homes, some of which were electrified and some of which were converted from propane to natural gas. We also have another program launching this year. It's called the Wildfire and Natural Disaster Resiliency Recovery Program. This is a $50 million program for electrifying those homes that were burned down in a wildfire or otherwise faced any natural disaster. And this pot of money is focused especially to make sure that they do not build with gas again. We also have our $1 billion energy efficiency portfolio, out of which a small subset goes towards fuel substitution measures, which is again a way of saying converting from gas appliances to electric appliances. And finally, again, getting replenished this year is our self-generation incentive program. Since last year, it now has a water heater component because we consider heat pump water heaters to also be energy storage devices, since you can heat up water to a much higher temperature in off-peak hours and then use that temperature during on-peak hours without putting additional strain on the grid. So now the SGIP program considers water heaters as storage devices and has $84 million just for water heaters, which also kicks on in a couple of months this year. Next slide, please. How are we doing on time, Andrew? Good? Okay. How many minutes do I have?
You have about 6 minutes or so.
Okay, thank you. So I want to talk about the first proceeding and program I spoke about. This is the Building Decarbonization Proceeding, and these are the two signature programs we had launched in 2020. We allocated $200 million authorized by SB 1477 and launched the Building Initiative for Low Emissions Development Program, a $78 million new construction, mostly low-income program, which is administered by our sister agency, CEC, with oversight from CPUC. We also have an existing buildings program ongoing right now called the Technology and Equipment for Clean Heating Initiative. This is a $117 million program, which was extremely successful right off the bat and expended most of its funding with a very innovative effort by the implementer Energy Solutions to engage the contractors who come to install these equipment to your home directly and to give them incentives directly. We call that a midstream program. And within 6 months, we were able to book out the $117 million of incentives that were authorized for the program. Then earlier this year, we added another $50 million to the pot, and that $50 million is going to be available in another month or so. There is also the potential of another $95 million envisioned to be approved by the legislature for 2023-24. And these are two websites I've provided. Whether you are an individual or a contractor, these websites will guide you to how to enroll in the program. And like I was mentioning before, these are our two pilots. We've put some information on about what was the scope of the pilots. Okay, I've already spoken to this, Andrew. I think I'll save some time and skip to the next slide. So this is now speaking about CEC's activities for building electrification. That is our other sister agency. As I said, they set the building energy standards and local reach code. They're also our partner in implementing the build program. They have a new market rate new construction program coming up called CAL EHP. And as I mentioned in the beginning, they will have almost about $900 million for implementing the Equitable Building Decarbonization Program, out of which 600 million is for low-income existing buildings. And the last bullet, which is the statewide incentive program, is about another $300 million. The last I heard, they expect to have the programs launching probably by end of this year, beginning of next year. And again, the links to these programs and where you can find more information is provided in the appendix to these slides. And that's it. With this, I wanted to hand it over to Becky Menton from Building Decarb Coalition to give you a deeper dive into the role of local governments and how you can come along in this new era of decarbonization that we are trying to set for California.
Before we head to Becky, Avi, I just wanted to remind everybody that please send the questions in the chat and then we'll try to ask. But I do have a question from a stakeholder as I've disseminated the webinar, and one of the cities had asked how can they become a part of the pilot program? Is it possible for them to get on a distribution list, or how does the department decide what entity is going to be a part of that pilot project?
Great question, Andrew. So the pilot programs are not city specific. They are implemented by the implementer who enrolls contractors into the program, contractors across the state in any gas IOU territory. So that's PG&E, SoCalGas, San Diego Gas and Electric. And the way it works is once the contractor is on board, if your water heater has broken down or if you were looking to change a furnace as an individual and you will call a contractor, they will already know about the program. So it doesn't matter what city you are in. It's set up for everybody to access just through the way natural selection works when we are trying to change out our devices in our homes. So it is not city specific.
Thank you. Hector, are there any questions in the Q&A?
Yeah, so we did have a few questions that are starting to come in, Abby. So this one is from Raphael, and he's asking, is there a master plan for electrification to reach low-income communities? He sounds like he's concerned if they'll be left behind.
That's another great question and something we almost on a daily basis discuss within PUC. So our long-term gas decommissioning proceeding, that is the core purpose of that proceeding, to make sure that our low-income folks are not left holding the bag, and so that transition is strategic. They released a staff proposal late last year, which is available, and the proceedings link is in the additional resources. So you can find that proposal in there and get more involved by subscribing to that proceeding to look at, to understand how they're looking at how not to leave the low-income folks behind. On top of that, within our own programs, we always have a carve out for low income. So within the SCHIP heat pump water heater program, there is a carve out for incentives, and they are generally 100% incentives for low income customers. In the $50 million that was approved for the tech initiative recently, there is a 40% carve out for low income. And even within the Wonder program, even although the implementer is not hired yet, the commission has given direction to the future implementer on how to ensure that low-income customers will get the full benefit of electrification.
And thank you, Abby. And another question from Sue from Pacifica. She says, hey, we have PG&E, and they've had outages for up to 10 days. And she says, how is this going to be remedied? If we have low income folks and they have all electric, so they won't have any heat or cooking or internet, which is an issue.
So I can speak to this from a personal perspective first, because while I don't work in the safety division, I'm always concerned that as we champion electrification, how would that look like from the customer perspective? I myself live in an all electric home and had a 48-hour outage just during this new year. And to be honest, and again, I'm not trying to minimize the concern. That concern is there, which is why you see at a proceeding level the partnership between solar storage and electrification, right? So as you saw in the SGIP proceeding, I mentioned we are bringing together these devices because we think when the battery storage is offered along with solar and along with electrification, it becomes that complete package of not only bill savings, but also giving you assurance that you'll be able to power your home during outages. With that said, when my all-electric home was in a power outage, my biggest concern was cooking, because you also don't want to go out in the storms too much. I honestly, I find DoorDash and these services too expensive to even eat more than once in 6 months from them. So we really needed to cook. And what we did was we pulled out this little induction burner, which you can plug into a small battery. We got a small $300 battery from Costco, and ramen it was that night. I'm not saying this is the ideal solution. I'm simply trying to share my personal experience living in an all-electric home. But the heat wasn't as much of a concern to us. It's just when I saw 2 months later all the complaints about the gas bills, I felt glad that we were able to be in an all-electric home and not have to face that part. So there's always trade-offs. And as a matter of policy, what PUC is trying to do is kind of corral our resources and bring together that complete safety and bill savings package. That's how we are trying to align our proceedings.
Thanks, Abby. We have a couple more questions, and I think we got about 4 or 5 minutes, Andrew, before we have to move on. So this next question is from Bruce. So he says, hey, it makes sense to implement all appropriate building or home energy efficiency envelope upgrades before sizing and installing any new heat pump. Otherwise, the new equipment may well be oversized, which will lead to higher upfront and operating expenses, as well as unnecessary pressure to the grid. And his question is, how will this efficiency priority be implemented?
May I ask who Bruce is with before I answer the question?
Bruce, if you feel free to share with us where you're with. His name is Bruce Ray. I don't know what he's with.
Okay. It's okay, Bruce, if you can put it in the chat. Just wanted to make sure I'm connecting you to the right resources. It helps sometimes when we know your organization. Johns Manville, thank you so much. Is that a manufacturing company? Could you tell us more what that is?
Abby, do you mind if I just ask you one more question, and then if we have time, we can circle back to Bruce while he's typing a reply to you?
Sure.
Okay. So this one's from Tom Kabat. He says, given that the 9 Bay Area counties BAA QMD rules for zero NOx water heaters and furnaces has been approved with the first review of local market readiness in 2025, how might the state agencies provide focused assistance to the 9 county areas with assuring market readiness to help make this successful.
Okay, sorry, I missed that last part. How might state agencies provide what?
Focused assistance to the 9 county area with assuring market readiness to help make this successful.
Oh, that's a great question, Tom. It's a $1 million question. Maybe there's a $1 million grant in there. I think I draw a lot of hope from having these programs with flexibility out there. And I feel like with the correct carrot, with the correct impetus, we can bring manufacturers along to start understanding that, not just California, but US as a whole is serious about transitioning away from natural gas appliances. Tom, I know you work in this line, so I know you're aware of the CARB regulations, which are going to phase out these devices. So from our perspective, I think the best thing we can do is to keep that signal to the manufacturer strong and clear, as well as to provide them with perhaps some grant opportunities to start transitioning to their devices away, and perhaps even have a focus on refrigerants. It's our policy to try to push the envelope on lowering the GWP threshold of refrigerants. And we are in dialogue with manufacturers to see what's preventing that from happening sooner. Okay, so to go back to Bruce's question, Bruce, you said you are a manufacturer of insulation. What we are trying to focus on in every program, especially with the IRA incentives kicking in, which, as you know, provide incentives for insulation along with heat pumps. What we are trying to get our programs to focus on is, once again, bringing an integrated approach to when a customer is given these offerings, right? So in our mind, building electrification is not so far away from efficiency. A heat pump is a very efficient device, and similarly, a home's efficiency makes it such that you would need less, as you said yourself, you would need a smaller size system. And we want to make sure that when we are engaging with contractors and we are giving them training and materials, they are bringing that understanding to the customer. So the loading order hasn't changed. Efficiency is still our partner, is something that's important along with electrification. And to us, the delivery happens through the contractor who we help through training resources. So tech and build both have a component of training the contractor, and that is where we are hoping that this partnership continues to stay.
Thank you, Abhi. In the interest of time, we'll move on to the next presenter. There are links that Abhi has alluded to, so they'll be in the back of the slide deck, which will be available for public viewing. But let's go ahead and move on to our next presenter. As I introduce to you, Becky Menton. Becky focuses on supporting policy to accelerate the adoption of building decarbonization with Building Decarbonization Coalition. Prior to joining BDC, Becky worked on energy programs for community choice aggregations for nearly 10 years, working both at Marin Clean Energy and most recently at East Bay Community Energy. Becky has worked at both the California Energy Commission and the CPUC, in addition to overseeing distributed energy resources programs at the Center for Sustainable Energy. Welcome, Becky.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here with everyone this morning. I am planning on talking about the local context, but I also wanted to give a bit more of an introduction to some of the technologies that are promoting and enabling building electrification right now. So thank you again for having me. First thing first, why are we doing this in the first place? We know that the electrification of buildings is a good thing, not only in the context of carbon emissions and what's happening to our warming climate, but also because there's growing evidence that links the combustion of natural gas appliances to indoor air quality impacts, things that have exacerbated or caused asthma or other respiratory impacts. Buildings are a contributor to our greenhouse gas emission challenge. I'm seeing a lot of valid anxiety in the chat regarding reliability issues and power outages. We've all seen the intensity, severity, and instance of storms increasing, which has caused a lot of impacts to our state. In fact, I'm surprised many of us can be here given so many of the power outages that our utilities are trying to address right now. I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that this is, in many cases, a result of the climate crisis. So we do need to have solutions to deal with this reliability, but we also can't lose sight of the fact that the combustion of these carbon appliances is part of what is causing this ongoing issue for us. So we know that the electrification of buildings is something that needs to happen in order to help us mitigate some of these climate impacts. Next slide, please. Another thing that doesn't get a lot of attention is the role of building electrification in helping to stabilize rates moving forward. The gas infrastructure system is paid for by the customers who are using the gas system. As more and more customers move to adopt electric buildings, that leaves a fewer amount of customers overall who are paying for those fixed costs associated with maintaining the distributed gas infrastructure. Because of that, moving towards electrification actually can allow us to have some level of rate stability. In addition to that, we have seen that gas is subject to extreme volatility in gas prices. This is something that I myself, as a customer, have experienced recently. Moving to all electric can actually give you some demand flexibility as well. When you have an all electric appliance, you can control when that appliance uses energy, and that allows you to draw energy from the grid, both when it is cheap, thanks to emerging time of use rates, as well as when that energy is more clean. We know that we have an abundance of renewables at certain times on our grid infrastructure. All electric appliances can actually pull power when the grid is delivering clean and cheap electricity to be used at a later time, thanks to these load control devices. The last thing I want to speak to here is the fact that there are all electric rates being rolled out from every major investor owned utility. Those are rates that improve the affordability of all electric buildings. Next slide, please. So I wanted to take just a moment and talk a little bit about what the appliances that are involved in an all-electric building actually look like. First things first, you may be surprised to know that most of you likely already have a heat pump in your home. Heat pumps are the same technology that's used for your refrigerator. What a heat pump does is it basically extracts energy from ambient air temperature, uses a refrigerant phase shift to really pull more energy out of ambient air temperature than you might even realize is there, and then dumps that energy into a heating or cooling process. Another wonderful thing about heat pumps is that they can be bidirectional. They are by default, in the case of HVAC, bidirectional. So for example, if your furnace fails and you're looking to replace your furnace and you live in an area that is experiencing extreme heat crises where you didn't normally need AC, if you replace your furnace with a heat pump, now you not only have a highly efficient furnace. Most heat pumps have about 300% efficiency compared to 80%, maybe 90% from the best boiler systems I've seen, but they also provide cooling. So it really can be a very cool way to upgrade the appliances you have in your house and prepare yourself for future resiliency. Let's move on because we're actually going to do a deep dive into induction. So here we are with the deep dive into induction. Induction technology is not new. None of these technologies that are involved in all electric buildings are new, though we are getting increasing investment in research and development that is improving the options available to you as a customer. But induction is foreign to many of the customers in America because it's largely been adopted in Europe and in Japan. So let me talk a little bit about what it actually is. Induction does not use a heat source to cook your food. What you normally do when you turn on an electric resistant stove or a gas stove is there is a heating element which then heats the pan, which then cooks your food. In the case of induction, it relies on electromagnetic currents to actually excite electrons in the pan, turning the pan itself into the heat source. Because there's no direct heat source, as there is with many cooking technologies, it is actually much safer for many consumers. You can usually move the pot, touch the stove, and voila, there's no issue of being burned or having any like direct heat issues. No more concerns about did I turn off the gas before leaving my kitchen, and crucially, no more issues about indoor air quality impacts associated with the combustion of fossil fuel appliances. Because you're not combusting gas in order to provide that heat source, you also frequently can save on ventilation. You still are required to have ventilation. It's still important anytime you have food and VOC particles arising from the food you're cooking, but you need it a lot less and a lot less strong, which can be more efficient and cheaper to operate. Another benefit of not combusting that gas as a source of your cooking is that you're typically dealing with a more comfortable environment. When you're combusting natural gas in order to cook your food, you lose anywhere from 40 to 60% of the energy to waste heat. That waste heat in turn makes your kitchen hotter. You can feel it when you're working over a gas stove. That's not the case when you're working with induction. Next slide, please.
Sorry about that. Technical difficulty.
Okay, am I back?
Oh, you are. My slides aren't popping up.
Okay.
Um,
Would you like me to share?
Let me see. I can do it.
Okay, great. Hopefully you guys got all of that. I know I mentioned earlier that it's a miracle we're all here with all of the power outages from this recent storm. We are not immune from that as well. We have a tree down in front of our house, which has been causing some difficulties with phone and internet connection.
Okay, here it is. Let me make sure I get the right
I think we can
screen.
move to the benefits of electric kitchen slide. Great, thank you very much. So I spoke to many of these, but again, a few things I want to drill down on here. The performance of induction cooking is really night and day from previous cooking methods. Again, because you are heating the pan itself and you're not dealing with the heating element, which is then heating the pan, it's much faster and much more responsive than your typical cooking systems. If any of you have tried induction cooking, and there are a lot of programs out right now where you can rent a stove and try it at home before you decide if it's a form of cooking that you're interested in using, you may be surprised to discover how fast you can boil water and how soon you can turn off the heat. This is really wonderful when you're doing sauces, working with something that is very temperature sensitive, and you need to make sure that you get it at a very precise temperature. For those reasons, a lot of cooks are actually moving towards induction in places that they hadn't before. We already addressed the safety, no open flames, you don't have to worry about leaving your stove on. Health, a growing body of evidence is connecting the combustion of gas and cooking to increase instances or severity of respiratory ailments. And of course, sustainability. Whenever you're cooking with a fossil gas appliance, you're never going to be supporting renewable energy in terms of cooking. And as I mentioned before, we have a surplus of renewable energy available at certain times of day. Electric appliances can draw down on that renewable energy, which can make your cooking cleaner for yourself and for the environment. We at the Building Decarbonization Coalition have been doing a lot of work to identify and promote chefs who love to work with induction. So I would encourage you, if you're curious, to check out our website. We also have resources I'll talk about later via the switches on, and you can see videos from different chefs who are promoting how they have really adopted induction cooking in their personal lives and in their professional lives. So there are some myth busting points that I wanted to deal with now. One of them we've heard a lot about today, and as I've said, we are dealing with power outages ourselves here in Northern California. It is an issue for all electric buildings. I also want to point out that many gas appliances these days, especially modern gas appliances, actually also require some form of electricity. There are solutions for power outages, such as having battery backup, having panel upgrades. There's also an increasing amount of money in California going towards resiliency centers so that there can be places within each community that have key functionality available even in the event of power outages. So if it's not feasible for us to install batteries on 100% of the houses tomorrow, we can at least make sure that we have key located community centers that are able to provide services to the community when there are instances of ongoing lengthy power outages. Panel upgrades. A lot of folks have really focused in on the issue of needing to upgrade the service panel within your building in order to adopt all electric technologies. For some customers, this may be the case. For many customers, however, there are likely a lot of options available to you before you need to upgrade your panel. More and more of the all-electric technologies are retrofit ready, meaning that they're coming out at a lower voltage. You can plug them straight into your wall without additional wiring upgrades, and they don't require an upgrade to the capacity of your panel. Load control devices may also be able to control the amount of energy being pulled from your panel at any certain point in time. And efficiency, we should never forget the role of efficiency, both in terms of improving the affordability of your energy consumption and an increasing capacity that may exist within your building on your service panel. One thing we hear all the time with induction cooking is whether or not it's compatible with wok. I know a lot of people were really looking for that wok hay when you get that high heat and you see that flame licking up on the side of the wok cooking, but there are an increasing number of technologies that are available, even affordable, for induction woks. The induction wok technology that I have seen is a cradle. So it actually increases the surface area contact with your wok and with the induction hob itself. And I can tell you, as someone who loves to stir fry and has a wonderful carbon fire wok, I don't get from my home gas cooking unit the level of flame that really would be needed for that commercial wok. So I would envision for myself that the cradle wok would actually be superior. I've already spoken to what I think is the superior ability of induction related to cooking with gas. You have more precision. You can turn the heat on faster. You can turn it off quicker. It really does deliver you a much better control over your cooking environment. It has a learning curve. I'm not going to say it doesn't. You do need to get familiar because at first you can burn your food very fast if you're not accustomed to how fast and how responsive the cook stove is. But once you get used to it, I think you'll find that it is a very powerful form of cooking with many, many benefits. And there's also a thing we hear a lot, that the cost of heat pump technology is prohibitively expensive. We know that right now, the comparable technologies for many heat pumps are higher when you go to the store than the conventional gas appliances. But there are so many rebate programs coming down the road these days that we're seeing more and more parity once you take the rebates into consideration through the Investment Reduction Act, through the CPUC's tech program. There are an emerging number of programs that Avi spoke to from the Energy Commission that will help with direct install for customers who can't afford out-of-pocket investment. And as these rebates come available, and as more companies adopt and more stores supply the technologies, we're expecting to see a cost curve similar to what we did with solar technology. Whereas more and more folks start to invest and adopt, the costs overall are likely going to come down. So I am going to speak about what local governments can do. And one of the things that I want to really focus in on is the authority of local governments to adopt building codes that go beyond the standards in the state code for energy consumption and construction. These are known as REACH codes. And California has been really leaning into REACH codes. As of now, more than 75 jurisdictions across California have adopted some form of electric preferred REACH code. At the Building Decarbonization Coalition, we've been active in tracking this REACH code adoption, not only within the state of California, but also across the United States. We're now at more than 100 jurisdictions across the United States. In California, we know that at least 1 in 5 customers live in an area that is covered by some form of REACH code. Something I will also note, however, is that there is a very clear cluster of where these REACH codes have been adopted in California, largely in the coastal cities. This is great because a lot of our population is in the coastal cities. So now there are a lot of our population who lives in an area where the government is really signaling to the industry that they're ready for these all electric buildings. However, I mentioned earlier the fact that we're seeing more extreme heat events as a result of this climate crisis. And a lot of that is really materializing in the interior parts of California. So where there could be places where we are replacing furnaces, for example, with heat pumps and enabling air conditioning where there wasn't before, the areas that are most impacted by the climate crisis are not actually, or by the extreme heat crisis, I should clarify, are not getting the benefit of these local REACH codes. So we still need a really strong code from the Energy Commission in the state of California. I shared a link to our tracking system at the Building Decarbonization Coalition, but this is a screenshot of what you'll find when you follow that link. What's really cool about the tool that we offer, if you can see, I know it's very small, I apologize. This is like the worst webinar etiquette to have such a tiny type on a slide. But up top, you actually can filter within our tool to look at different states, look at different jurisdictions, and get a sense of what is covered and what is not covered within each of the REACH codes that local jurisdictions have passed. So we hope that that tool can be useful for you. We have a few other tools that I want to take a moment to talk about from the Building Decarbonization Coalition, some of which are funded in partnership with the Public Utilities Commission through the TEC program. The Switches On is really a resource to customers in general, whether you're curious about electric technology, whether you're totally ready to get involved in electric technology. The Switches On is a place where you can come, you can find out more about the different technologies available to you. You can search for rebates and incentives that are available in your region. You can even search for contractors that are available in your region as well. So the switcheson.org hopefully is something that all of you can use moving forward to continue your education on all electric buildings. Switches On is not just for customers. As I mentioned, it's a place where you can search for contractors. Therefore, if you are an installer or a contractor who's interested in either learning more about some of the rebates and how you might be able to participate in those rebate programs, if you want to make sure your information is available on our contractor database so customers can find you and connect with you, this link would be the right one for you to use to learn more about how to get engaged with our website. So that is the end of my prepared remarks, and I'm happy to be available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Becky. I do have one question coming from a stakeholder, again, prior to the presentation, and you may not have covered it, but we did see in the map that a lot of the REACH codes are more on the coastal cities. Is there any way that your entity, your organization sees that it would be easier or a smoother transition for the rural counties and cities to adopt REACH codes?
Yes, absolutely. So REACH codes, I mean, I am someone who worked in local government for a very long time, and And the role of local government in really spurring the market and moving the industry as a whole is important. And reach codes are one really great example of that. I mean, the city of Berkeley with their natural gas ban sparked a national conversation and a national movement, and has really moved PG&E to start to think about how they work with local governments who are exercising their jurisdictional authority in these areas. With that said, the fact that there might be 75 distinct reach codes across the state of California is not the best news for a manufacturer, for contractors, for large builders and developers who are trying to navigate the different distinctions from region to region. Because of that, what we hope is that these local actions will really start to send a signal to state government, and that state government will move to adopt some form of building code that promotes all electric in a consistent way across the entire state of California. When you have that statewide consistency, that really sends very strong and clear signals to the industry about where California is going, about what kind of technologies we want to see on the markets here, and about the long-term horizon that they can plan for when providing those technologies to the state. And that also, as you noted, really helps make sure that the benefits of these policies are felt equitably across the state, as opposed to concentrated in the cities where there might be the most political willpower to get them accomplished.
Thank you, Becky. Hector, are there any questions in the chat?
Yeah, we have a couple questions. Andrew, this one might be for you. It's from Christina. She's asking if will there be a press release with the summary of the workshop and links to the resources so this can be shared on social media?
Yeah, there won't be any press release, but all this information will be on the CPUC's informational webinar website. And I did put in the link, and we'll pass it along again in the chat.
Awesome. And then we did get a question here from John. He's asking, what kind of support can local governments expect from state agencies in implementing and enforcing building codes that promote electrification? Are there penalties for non-compliance? And Becky, I'm not sure if you want to speak to this, or if Abby, you would want to jump in and add anything to it.
I'm happy to take a swing at this one. Again, having worked in local government for a long time, I'm pretty familiar with how the permitting and planning processes take place. And the enforcement of local building codes has always been something that has been on the plates of local building offices. Every permit office has a building inspector and a building official who are charged with making sure that plans that come through their desk comply with local building codes, and that those who are engaging in construction projects follow them. Does that mean that every contractor pulls a permit? No. We know that this is a massive enforcement issue in California generally. It is not distinct for all electric buildings. There is some legislation, I'm sorry that I don't remember the number, but I'll look it up and drop it in the chat, that's looking at establishing a more firm system for permitting enforcement and compliance across the state of California. This is not just important for compliance with local building codes, but there are actually very important performance-based outcomes on your building related to whether or not you're pulling a permit and following the proper steps for installation of any gas appliance. You can have backdrafting, you can have carbon monoxide issues in your building, you can have efficiency issues in your building if you're not installing a combustion appliance to code and having an inspector come and verify that that appliance was installed to code. So note to folks, I know you can save money by not going through a permit system, but you can also lose money down the road from an inefficiently installed appliance. So that's one thing I will say. In regards to what kind of resources are available for local governments, I know from having worked at a CCA where we were promoting the adoption of reach codes that we also worked on providing toolkits for those local government building officials where they could, look at the things that they needed to check when they had a plan come through, training for inspectors so that they're aware of what they have to look out for with an all-electric installation as opposed to a natural gas one. So there are resources that are available regionally. And if there was a statewide program, those resources would be part of the statewide implementation of the code as well.
Thank you, Becky. And I do believe that was the last question, so
There
let's move
is
on.
one question, if you don't mind, that I would love to
Yeah.
respond to that popped up in the chat. And this is the idea of electric rates going up as well. This was in response to my comment about the volatility of gas rates and the impact that that has on costs moving forward. First of all, 100%, we know that electricity rates are going up in California. This is due to a lot of things. This is due to the subsidies and public programs that we include in rates. This is due to the liability that the utilities are shouldering as a result of wildfires and their need to harden the grid in response to that. This is for sure known. We also know from modeling for the future that gas rates are going to increase even more dramatically over time. And what we also know is that the California Public Utilities Commission is engaged through the building electrification proceeding and through the demand flexibility proceeding at really exploring different pathways for improving the affordability of electric rates. So I just want to acknowledge that that is the case and queue up that there is a lot of work being done on that at the CPUC. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky, for that. And as we move to our next speaker, that's a great segue into understanding financing. Everyone, please welcome Kelly Delaney. Kelly is an energy efficiency financing specialist from the California State Treasurer's California Alternative Energy and Advanced Transportation Financing Authority. Kelly focuses on the residential and affordable multifamily sectors through the state's Go Green financing programs, and she has a master's in environmental management and policy from Lund University in Sweden. Kelly, you could take it away.
Great. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Again, I'm Kelly. I'm here with the Go Green financing team and want to just say thank you to everybody for being here today. This is a longer webinar, so I hope you're still feeling energized. I'm going to talk about our 3 programs for residential, business, and affordable multifamily energy efficiency and decarbonization financing. And I'd also love to discuss some opportunities to partner with our local government and community organizations that are on the call today. So a little bit of background, Go Green Financing was created to leverage private capital for energy efficiency and decarbonization retrofits, and it's a part of this very important effort that we've all heard about today to meet California's aggressive climate goals and reduce energy consumption. We have heard about a number of rebate and incentive programs and the benefits of making the electrification and decarbonization switch, but we also just have to acknowledge that there is simply not enough subsidy capital to pay for all the investments that we need to upgrade our existing buildings and get the energy savings that we need. So our financing program exists to help support those customer investments in their buildings and their homes, and to sort of pick up where your savings or the rebates end. Because we know that customers will say yes to projects more if you can remove that upfront barrier of cost, and they might say yes to even larger projects and achieve more energy savings and deeper decarbonization. I'll talk a little bit about how we do this, but if you want to move to the next slide. First, I'll give a brief overview of sort of who we are and where we are. So we're a financing authority housed in the state treasurer's office. I'm up here in rainy Sacramento today. Our legal authority comes from the PUC, and we are supported by ratepayer dollars from the IOUs with the goal to help them and their customers save energy. So Go Green Financing is our public-facing platform, but we have a number of acronyms on the back end. So how do we do this? Our primary mechanism for all of our programs is a credit enhancement, and this acts in the form of a loan loss reserve. So lenders receive a loss reserve contribution for every financing agreement that they enroll with us, and this reserve sort of acts like loan insurance. So they can recover up to 90% of a defaulted loan's balance through this reserve. The more loans they enroll, the larger their reserve, their insurance fund grows. And so for this, in exchange for this sort of considerable protection and for sharing the risk with them, we ask our enrolled finance companies to pass along better benefits for borrowers. This usually sort of takes the form of 4 different benefits, and they're demonstrated there in that table at the bottom of the screen. And the examples from our Go Green Home, our residential program. So often this looks like lower interest rates, We have a cap on interest rates, but our average is about 2.95% for a 30-month loan, up to 8.1%. They haven't really they haven't really gone up in this current economic climate, which is pretty remarkable. We're really proud of our credit union partners for helping keep rates affordable. And of course, this is just a much better deal than the average of 21%. It also looks like longer repayment terms. So the average HVAC loan, for example, is about 5 years, but our lenders often go up to 10 or 15 years with us. We see them raising the amounts of financing that they'll offer. So anywhere from 20 to 35,000, we ask our lenders to go up to 50,000, and most of them are able to meet that request. And many of them also have dropped their minimum credit score requirements down to even just 580. Another benefit is there's no property liens through our program. And of course, as I mentioned, it's able to be used in conjunction with utility rebates and incentives and other programs. Next slide, please. Just a brief overview of our many lenders. We have 15 participating finance companies. We're about to onboard another one in our residential sector program and have a lot of interest from others. This is hundreds of millions in financing capacity that can be immediately deployed towards our goals of energy efficiency and decarbonization. These companies are ready to go. Next slide, please. So in our typical process, our customers will find a finance company, they'll apply directly, or they can work with one of our participating contractors to start a project and then contact the finance company. Both approaches work equally well. All of our programs have a list of pre-qualified measures, energy measures that can be financed. These are made up of broad categories and designed to be inclusive of most energy saving projects rather than being prescriptive. One great thing about our programs is that elements of the installation that are legally or practically necessary. So the cost of that electrical panel upgrade that we heard about earlier, or relocating your water heater to get that heat pump water heater installed in your garage, those costs can be included in that financed amount. Another great thing about our programs is that up to 30% of that financed amount can be spent on non-energy measures like kitchen cabinets and flooring, or drought tolerant landscaping, or adding a wheelchair ramp, these kind of structural improvements. A lot of times, especially for older buildings, there are additional structural improvements that need to happen to facilitate electrification. So that can be financed as well. One note, sorry, if you could go back really quickly. Just one note there at the bottom, because our funding comes from the PUC as a part of an energy efficiency budget, we currently cannot, the verb we use is credit enhance loans for solar or battery storage. I will have a note about this at the end of my presentation. Next slide. I'm going to give a brief overview of our 3 programs. So first, I want to just talk about our commercial financing program, Go Green Business. This is for small and medium-sized businesses under 100 employees or 15 million in annual revenue, and can be used to finance up to 5 million in energy upgrades. This program is also eligible for, or this program can also be used for financing for market rate multifamily properties. Just like the example of the residential benefits that I discussed earlier, Go Green Business offers significantly reduced interest rates, larger financed amounts, longer repayment terms, and approvals for customers who are less creditworthy or perhaps are in risky industries that struggle to access financing, such as restaurants, houses of worship, or even cannabis growers. One important eligibility requirement that I want to note is that at least 70% of a Go Green Business loan must finance measures that reduce the use of gas or electricity delivered by an IOU, so PG&E, SDG&E, SoCal Gas, or SoCal Edison. Next slide, please. Go Green Multifamily is for affordable multifamily properties in the state. Obviously, we've talked a lot about equity on this call. Helping these affordable properties make energy efficiency and decarbonization upgrades is very important to us and a key part of achieving our ambitious plans. As a part of this equity element, we require that any properties that receive a loan through this program, at least 50% of the units on that property must be eligible via income restriction. They must be income restricted, and there must be at least 5 years remaining on the property's affordability covenant. So maybe an interesting distinction to make is that for what we call NOAAs, naturally occurring affordable housing, if they don't have that deed restriction, we would refer them to Go Green Business, where they are still eligible for very competitive financing. Like Go Green Business, 70% of the loan must finance measures that reduce the use of gas or electricity delivered by an IOU. Go Green Multifamily is designed to play very well with others. Like all of our programs, can be layered with clean energy or energy efficiency assistance programs like LIWIP or SOMA. Each of the IOUs have their own programs as well, but it's also a great option for property owners who don't want to wait through the application process or who have those non-energy repairs that they'd like to make as well. Next slide, please. So Go Green Home, as you might imagine, is targeted towards the single family residential sector, and that includes duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, but it also includes a unit, like a condo unit in a multifamily structure. You know, if you're just the owner of this one unit and you want to make some upgrades, that qualifies for Go Green Home. We do serve credit challenged borrowers and LMI customers. Just to note that again, we want to serve disadvantaged borrowers, but to the extent that those customers have the cash flow needed to repay a private capital loan, because we don't want to be shouldering people with debt that they can't afford. It's worth noting, of course, that it's not just for homeowners. Renters can also use it. So the most common example would be to purchase appliances. And on that note, Go Green financing is available on the SoCal Gas and SoCal Edison utility marketplaces for appliance purchases up to $5,000. I want to note one other differentiator about Go Green Home, which you can see in the bold, in the green box, receives gas or electricity from an IOU, slightly different language from Go Green Business and Go Green Multifamily. And if you'll move to the next slide, I will talk about why. So up until now, we've only been able to finance projects for IOU customers, right, due to the CPUC rules and our funding sources. This has resulted in a bit of a web of eligibility complexity based on utility jurisdiction that makes those impactful but costly decarbonization upgrades like heat pumps a little bit inaccessible for Californians that are served by a gas IOU, but an electric publicly owned utility such as SMUD here in Sacramento or LADWP. We're very pleased to share that last year, Go Green Home, so this is only specific to Go Green Home at the moment, began a partnership with the Tech Clean California Initiative. Avi talked about this earlier. It's a market transformation initiative designed to accelerate that adoption of our heat pump technology. So incorporation of tech funds has allowed us to expand Go Green Home eligibility to those previously restricted customers. So now here in Sacramento, if you want to do a complete electrification project, you are able to, even if you are getting electricity from SMUD. Next slide, please. So now is my time to ask our audience to weigh in. I see there's a lot of local governments, there's a lot of industry groups, some CCAs, some POUs on this call. We'd really love to work with each of you on how to get Go Green financing in front of your constituents or customers. If you have websites that have information and resources, we have a marketing toolkit that we can give you with copy that you can just plug and place wherever it's best. We aren't implementers, you know, we can't go door to door, but we can provide that marketing support. We can do webinars with your constituents or your contractors. For example, if you have a good local contractor network. We are also always interested in getting connected with local credit unions and lenders if you have good relationships or recommendations there, because our contractors and our lenders are the ways that customers really learn about Go Green financing. They are our feet on the ground. And so if we can build those relationships and that network with those entities in your communities, we really appreciate your assistance with that. And yeah, next slide. So I mentioned before that we currently cannot credit enhanced loans for solar and energy storage. We do have a proposal into this financing proceeding, R2008-2022, where we have asked for permission to expand Go Green financing to cover those comprehensive technologies of solar and storage and EV charging. We've also asked for reauthorization of our non-residential program. So this would allow large public buildings to finance energy efficiency and possibly get it and possibly, repay it on the bill, because we did just implement on-bill financing through, on-bill repayment through Go Green Business. So that's one exciting potential change that is teed up. We are waiting to hear back about getting permission to launch these features. We are also always open for additional sources of funding. So if you are a local government or a CCA and you have funding that you would like to apply to maybe loans in your community, Go Green financing loans in your community, we are interested in working with you to supply interest rate buy downs. Getting people 0% loans for these upgrades is a really fantastic way to generate interest and to get projects going. Leveraging our existing credit enhancement infrastructure, if we could support for Go Green Business and Go Green Multifamily, offering those fully electric loans in electric POU territories, stuff like that. We are absolutely interested in what you're interested in. So feel free to contact us. And on that note, the next slide has my contact information. Feel free to reach out. Really appreciate the CPUC for facilitating this conversation and allowing us to spread the word about our programs. We look forward to hearing from you. Yeah, thank you again.
Thank you, Kelly. And before I ask Hector about the Q&A, is it best if any local agency just contact you directly through this email? Would that be the best way to connect with you or with the program?
Certainly, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. So I hope you'll be getting a lot of emails soon. Hector, are there any questions in the chat?
There are. Hi, Kelly. So this one's from John. It sounds like he's in Palo Alto. So he's asking if the new tech program expansion will benefit residences and businesses in Palo Alto.
That's a really good question, a very niche question, because Palo Alto is one of those rare communities in California that is not served at all by an IOU. Currently, no, the tech program has not allowed us to expand there because we do require them to receive at least one service, gas or electricity, from an IOU. But we are talking to Palo Alto, and we hope to have a solution to that soon.
So stay tuned, sounds like.
Stay tuned, watch this space.
Thanks, Kelly. Another question, is the interest waived on Go Green loan?
The interest is not waived on Go Green loans. So for example, on Go Green Business, we are going to soon offer an interest rate buy down, right? So for some projects, there will be 0% available, but that's not an inherent feature of our program. It's just through additional funding that we get. So that's one of the reasons I sort of suggested interest rate buy downs as a way that local community organizations or local governments can support this in their communities. So if you can chip in to help us reduce interest rates, we'd certainly appreciate it. Our lenders do offer pretty incredible interest rates that can make these projects much more affordable. So I think we're doing really great, but of course, getting down to 0%, 1%, 2% is a fantastic sales accelerator. So yeah.
One other question here. Does lending through the home program require a hard credit check? And also, if there's a failure to keep up with the loan payments, will let individuals or the lendees credit take a hit?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. These are normal loans. This is not the state lending money. This is not a direct install program or anything like that. So yes, each borrower is assessed for credit worthiness, and this will ding their credit report if they do not keep up with payments. That's why we work very closely with our lenders to make sure that they're broadening access, but we want to make sure that the borrowers have the cash flow to be able to pay back these loans. We check debt to income ratios to make sure that we're not saddling people with loans that they can't afford, especially from an equity perspective. That's very important to us.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Andrew, that looks like that's the questions there in the chat.
Thanks, Hector. At this point, we do want to provide a couple minutes if anyone has any questions for anybody else on the panel. I know that was a lot of information, but the webinar has been recorded and it will be disseminated through the CPUC's informational webinar. And if there aren't any questions at this time for anybody else, I can hand it off to our closing remarks.
Andrew, I see a question in the chat from Ivana that I don't think we've addressed so far.
Yeah, Abhi, you know what? I was looking for that question. Thank you for coming back to that. Hi, Ivana. Thank you for joining us. But yeah, if you can address that, Abhi,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
No question left behind. Hi, Ivana. Thanks for your question. It's a very important one. So the long-term gas decommissioning proceeding did scope in the obligation to serve question for PUC to address. It is also something we are looking to look up to our legislature to address in case there seems to be a jurisdiction barrier. So if it's beyond PUC's jurisdiction itself, then we would look to our legislators to address it, but it is scoped within that proceeding.
Thank you, Abhi. I truly appreciate that you caught that question. And I believe we may have a queued up example of an induction cooking going on for the pleasure of the audience. You can give me a second before I hand it off to you, Nick. Here's our very own chef showing off his skills. Is this working?
Yeah. It literally smells like tomato soup. Smell it, come on.
Okay, I can't stop laughing. So, yes, I will declare that is my son, Chef Fletcher, and he is, as you can see, cooking. He's 10 years old as of last week, and I feel so happy and proud that I can introduce him to, making very complex dishes. He was making a shakshuka over there, often does stir fry, started with ramen, but I'm never worried about his sleeves catching fire, nor NOx, increased NOx emissions in our home. And it's just been great to introduce him to cooking with an induction stove. There has been no incidents of dish towels burning or sleeves catching fire. So I highly recommend induction cooking. As Becky mentioned, please, if you can, try it out for yourself. Get a loaner from your library. They're about $50, the single burner ones on IKEA, if anyone's interested. And I'm a personal fan, so anyone who wants to hit me up personally, I'm happy to tell you all about it.
Thank you, Abhi, and thank you for a demonstration of the cooking at the home. Lastly, we will have our closing remarks from Nick Zanjani, Supervisor and Program Manager for the Building Decarbonization and Renewable Gas section here at the Energy Division. Nick first joined the department in 2011 and has been the supervisor of the building decarbonization section since its inception in 2020. Prior to that, he was the first director of the department's Consumer Protection and Enforcement Division. Nick came to the CPUC from the California State Assembly, where he was a Jesse M. Unruh Capital Fellow, and I'm sorry for butchering that. He is a Fulbright scholar and holds a master's degree from the London School of Economics. Take it away, Nick.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Just confirming, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Well, first and foremost, I wanted to just offer my sincere thanks to all the panelists who did a great job presenting a whole lot of information in a very clear and concise manner. I hope everyone else found it as interesting and enlightening as I did, and I appreciate you all taking the time. I also want to thank the organizers of the events, particularly Andrew, but also the whole team there at the Community Outreach Group. Really appreciate all of your effort as well. And then last, but certainly not least, want to thank everybody who is on the line, who has been watching in on the presentation and asking really, really great questions. It's always helpful to hear directly from you so that we don't get locked into this ivory tower where we're detached from the concerns of the community and the people on the ground. In the end, if we're going to be successful in meeting our climate goals, we have to work to resolve those concerns. We have to partner actively with all of you in the local communities who are going to be the essential actors in making this a successful effort as we work towards not only being less greenhouse gas intensive so that we can meet our climate goals, but also to enhance safety and in the end, ultimately enhance reliability as well. We're in a really exciting time period now as a state, but it's also one that is a bit nerve-wracking as well because there's so much change coming at us all at the same time. We are not only exploring how to safely and reliably and affordably move forward with building electrification, but we're also simultaneously addressing how to enhance reliability by making the investments necessary to harden our electric grid, to provide microgrids and options that would reduce outages, to move towards more clean and renewable electricity as a source, and also determining what the future is for customers who cannot easily electrify or who rely on combustion technology in order to manufacture the products that they need to stay competitive in the market, not only here in California, but wherever they need to sell their goods to. And we want to be respectful of their needs as well. But what I want to emphasize to everybody is that the change is coming one way or another, and we want to be cooperative partners with you and continue to encourage your interface with us and activity in our proceedings and active lines of communications with all of us so that we can make this a successful effort and make it a solution that works for everyone. You've seen the reasons explained why building electrification in particular is very essential to helping California meet its goals. You have seen that there are many cities that have already taken the steps necessary to ensure that future new construction is built all electric, and that there are other entities, whether it be local air quality districts or other state agencies or other forces at work that are making this an inevitability one way or another. So again, we are aware and we continue to appreciate your feedback as we work towards a solution that is equitable and works for everyone. So I just want to thank you all for providing that input and for helping us get on a better trajectory that works for all Californians. And with that, I will end my remarks and just thank you all once again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick. And this does conclude the end of today's webinar. Please look forward to our Q2 webinar in the future and emails disseminating when that will be happening. Thank you all.